have just made an amazing investment and I sell all of the Ethereum. Obviously, I don't know what I'm doing. I went from, I'm not going to make my money back, to I'm a genius, to I'm an idiot, all in the span of about 6 months. I either need to do some work here or I'm going to have to just go play a different game. The military really teaches you, like, do the hard thing. Go the difficult way. It is harder in the short term, but it will pay off in the long run.
Some people wait for opportunity. Others fight for it. Welcome to Tactical Wealth, the show where discipline, service, and real-world experience become pathways to financial power. I'm your host, Kaj Larson. On each episode, we bring you the stories and the wisdom of those who have gone from boots on the ground to successful careers, from military to wealth, and how they've done it so you can apply those insights to your own mission and your own life. This is Tactical Wealth, from military to money. Welcome back to another episode of Tactical Wealth. Today is going to be awesome because I have my friend, my colleague, fellow veteran, Anthony Pompliano here. I feel like a UFC announcer. Please welcome to Tactical Wealth, Anthony Pompliano. And my friend Pomp is, to keep the UFC analogy going, he really is the heavyweight champion of military to money, of taking his time in the service and translating it to being an entrepreneur, an angel investor, and a just all around success story when it comes to being a veteranpreneur. Prior to all of that, he served as a sergeant in an infantry sergeant in Iraq in Operation Iraqi Freedom. He was also at Facebook. He worked in venture capital before finally transitioning, building an incredible, extraordinary media platform, and then sitting here with us today as a multi-exited serial entrepreneur. Tony, welcome to the podcast. This is awesome for me because it's kind of full circle. Yeah. When I exited my company in Miami and when I was in the process of selling my company down in Miami, you were down in Miami. I had you had me on your show because you built this extraordinary media empire. And now here you are on my TV series. Welcome to Tactical Wealth.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Excited about it.
Yeah. So look, we're going to talk about all your extraordinary journey. I mean, ultimately, you've invested in over 200 companies, but I want to know where it started. Why did you join the military in the first place?
I think that part of it was actually Pat Tillman. When I was in 8th grade, 9/11 happened. And so you're just old enough to understand kind of the gravity of the situation, but you don't really kind of know what that means. And throughout high school, I played football, basketball, and baseball, and I really wanted to go play football in college. And so I signed to go play at Bucknell University in Pennsylvania. And I knew going into my senior year that also there was a potential opportunity to leave early and you can go enroll in college. And so I graduated in December of my senior year, which is a little weird. You know, you're kind of giving up going to graduation and prom and like all the cool stuff that kids want to do. There were some technical things that happened where I couldn't enroll. And so I was basically for an entire semester sitting at home. All my friends were in school and I went and I got 2 jobs and I got a job at Quiznos and a job at Chick-fil-A. And I would go, Monday, Wednesday, Friday to one and Tuesday, Thursday, the other. It was a very unique experience.
I didn't know this about you. These are interesting building blocks to become a business tycoon later in life.
Well, in doing so, what you really realized, I think my 2 big takeaways were one, I got paid more money to work at Chick-fil-A, but I had more fun at Quiznos. And it was constantly this battle of like, do I want the extra, 50 cents an hour or whatever it was, or do I want to go have fun? Now, the reason I was having fun is because there was a lot less rules, there was a lot less structure. Definitely that, location was not making as much money as the, very well-oiled machine of Chick-fil-A. So you can maybe see some of that, but Pat Tillman had obviously gone and given up his football career to go do this. And so just in the back of my head for years, I think it was always like, well, if he could do it, why don't more people do something like this? And having time on your hand, being 17 years old is usually like a recipe for disaster. And a recruiter one day walked into Quiznos and we started talking and it was kind of like a funny pass the time, whatever. And then a couple of weeks later, I said, maybe that'd be something that'd be pretty interesting. And I went and I signed a very unique contract where essentially I could go and I could join the reserves, I could go to school, and then I'd owe some time afterwards, kind of took it from there.
That's wild. And had Tillman been killed at this point in Afghanistan, or he was just kind of known to have like left this lucrative football career?
To be honest, I don't remember, but I think that this is in 2006. So I think it's like right around that period of time. So I don't remember exactly.
Did you ever read the Krakauer book about him, Where Men Win Glory?
I didn't read that one, but I know that Pete Blabber just published a book, and he kind of did an entire analysis. So sitting on my desk, and kind of like, all right, this guy knows what's going on. Maybe the analysis is gonna be pretty good.
Yeah, that's amazing. I remember being at Camp Tillman in Afghanistan and like reading the citations. Unbelievable, super inspirational. And why the Army? Just because the recruiter walked into Quiznos?
To be honest, people usually don't like to talk about this, but I remember, when you take the approach to life of like, whatever I do, I want to be good at it, right? You kind of see, okay, there's, everything from the SEALs to Delta to all this kind of stuff. But also at the same time, there's like a bird in my ear. My dad was like, you got to go to college. And I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. And that was very important to my family. And so you're kind of trying to balance, like, how do I go do this thing that seems really fun and cool and exciting and probably is going to be good for me, frankly, in terms of discipline and all that. But at the same time, there's going to be something after the military. And so go get the college degree. And I went and I looked at a couple of different ones, and the Army was paying a $20,000 signing bonus. And I remember as a 17-year-old kid being like, I would do this for free. He's going to give me $20,000. And so I always reference that because I think people forget, this is in 2006. There's kind of the surge is going on, and the government was struggling to get people to join the armed services. And so when we think about government spending and things that I spend a lot of time on today, we forget that like incentives do matter. I am a product of, they offered that and they were able to go and get years of my life to go and serve in the military. But also, hopefully I've been able to do things once I've gotten out that, the return on investment hopefully is pretty high for them there. And so, we just kind of have to find this balance of like, there are times where it's a really good idea for them to incentivize people. And then other times where, they're just wasting money.
Yeah. And the other incentive for you is the education piece, right? Which is, there's this extraordinary part of the reason I do this show is because there's this long tradition of, veterans coming back from World War II being educated on the GI Bill, the original GI Bill, and then building the greatest economic engine that the world has ever seen. And it sounds like you're following in the legacy of that tradition.
Yeah. Well, and look, I do credit quite a bit with, because I had this unique experience with the military where I essentially was able to play a combat sport of football, right? So there's some similarities. It's all dudes. You're wearing uniforms. It's us versus them. You don't have guns, but there is violence, right? And it's a very testosterone-driven environment. And so the ramp up to my junior year of college, I actually got pulled out of school and deployed overseas. And so you're not a full-time soldier when you're in the reserves. You're kind of doing this like, half in, half out thing. And so I credit a lot with my preparation to be deployed had been in this environment. But more importantly is when I came back, I went back to playing football. And so there was almost this like de-escalation from a military unit to then again, you're playing football, and all those criteria probably helped a lot too.
And you're on familiar turf, it sounds like. And just tell me briefly your experience in Iraq.
Yeah. I always say that I got somewhat of a watered down experience. We, in 2008, 2009, where we were in Iraq, we were at Camp Taji, about 12 miles north of Baghdad. And we did a lot of night route clearance. And so, you don't really know exactly what that means until you're there. And all of a sudden you realize like, wait, are we bait? You kind of start driving.
You said it, not me.
You're driving very slow with all your lights on in the middle of the night. And you're essentially looking for roadside bombs, or if there's going to be some sort of ambush, you're trying to elicit it because you're trained in doing that.
And at that time, the VVIDs were really ramping up, right?
They were bad.
So every little pile of garbage on the side of the road was a potential threat.
Yeah, and I always tell people, there's really kind of two data points that I use to explain this is there is the training that you receive, and then there's always the like real world on the ground, kind of application of it. And the training would be, okay, you're driving, you see the pile of trash, stop, call the EOD, or get out the Talon robot and go and do whatever.
Yeah, you would move at 1.5 miles an hour.
4 hours for them to get there. Also, so what ends up happening is we had at the time these V-shaped hull Huskies that would be out front. And you essentially tell them, we'll figure out if it's a bomb, just drive over it. Yeah. And to the normal person, that sounds insane, right? I full well understand that. but it's the practical application. And so the reason why I say it was a watered down experience is it was very spiky. We would go very long periods of time with absolutely nothing happening. And then there would be moments where all of a sudden there would be, an IED or something. And so that experience I actually think was somewhat unique in that you got the experience of the combat or the IEDs and that, but it wasn't the persistent threat every single day where, maybe 2 or 3 years earlier, every time you left the base, you knew that, something was going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is this misconception about combat, and obviously we're here to talk more about corporate than combat, but I do think there's this misconception about combat that it's always like, balls to the wall and just
sleep,
rounds
you're
flying,
getting shot
you're
while you're
getting
sleeping.
mortared every night or whatever. But like the best description of a combat zone is that it's 90% total boredom and 10% abject terror.
Yes.
The problem is you never know when the ratio is going to switch.
Yes.
So you're always on this like low level of alert. But I think, there are lots of things in life that maintain that battle rhythm.
100%.
Right?
The other thing I always bring up is, when you first get there, they tell you, hey, the first kind of 2 or 3 weeks, and then the last 2 or 3 weeks are some of the most dangerous. The local populace knows that you're switching teams or people are switching out. You're either the team leaving is not maybe as high alert. They're very excited about going home, and then it's your turn at the end of your deployment. And if I look back, there was kind of ramped up stuff in those time periods. But it's no different than getting a new job or starting a company. Like there are moments when you realize I really got to lock in here. I really got to pay attention because there's likely to be, just more chaos, uncertainty, volatility. And so it's time to pay attention.
Yeah. And I think the greatest challenge in entrepreneurship is the sort of volatility and the unknown unknowns,
Mhm.
right? And when you step like brand new into a combat zone, into a mission, like the sheer number of variables that you have to calculate into your personal algorithm
Mhm.
are almost overwhelming, just like starting a company, right? Like there is all these factors, some of which you can control, some of which you can't control, market forces. So I do think that one of the theses is that the challenges that you face in the military, because they are non-linear,
Mhm.
prepare you well for this dynamic environment to be a vetrepreneur.
I think one of the most pervasive misunderstandings of the military is everyone thinks that it is very rigid, and it is to a degree. There's rank and there's kind of training and formations and all that kind of stuff. But it is also very entrepreneurial, and that's good and bad, as better than I do. But I remember there are times where leadership would have us do something, and you're like, I know that they are doing this from a selfish perspective. I always tell a story that I remember being on a mission and we were asked to do some stuff, and it was almost like we were trying to get into some sort of combat situation.
Yeah, you wanted a tick.
And
Yeah.
you could draw back a line to like the person who was ordering us to do this had not yet gotten their combat action badge or
Right.
combat infantry badge.
Yep.
And you're like, why don't you come do this? I already got mine. Like, I'm good. And so it's no different than, management inside of a company or whatever. And so that entrepreneurial experience inside of a rigid environment, I credit, immensely with any success that I've had from a business perspective. It's kind of a weird training or breeding ground. But I think that you see a lot of veterans being successful in the business world because of it.
Yeah. So talk me through you redeploy back home, and you're in college, and then you finish school. Was that your journey?
The single most important decision I made related to the military or kind of my life direction was coming back from that deployment in Iraq. We would go to Kuwait, I think it's like 10 days or whatever to kind of decompress and start to transition back. And at the time in 2009, it basically was a job fair for the private contractors, right? You got Blackwater, everyone's there. Sure. And I remember they almost force you to go talk to all of them. And Blackwater was offering $200,000 to go right back. And they said, if you don't leave for a year, you get 200 grand. And so, at this point I turned 21 when I was in Iraq. And so 21 years old, offered 200 grand. I called my father and I said, yeah, I'll see you in a year. And, he very sternly told me, you can get on the plane and get your ass back here. And so from that perspective, I think that you start to understand, hey, it's not just about short-term, money, capital, et cetera. Went back to school, finished, and then pretty much right out of school, started trying to build companies and went through a journey of brute forcing to eventually over time becoming much more strategic, much more intelligent and kind of experienced on how to do that.
And what was the first business that you built?
Yeah, the very first business we ever built was a company that basically realized one of the most trafficked websites in America is the login page for parents to check their kids' activities at school, their grades, their assignments, etc. So if you go to a public school district, they'll kind of have this login page, and it usually is just a username and password, submit. But that page, to any other entrepreneur in the world, is money just sitting there, right? You can go put ads or whatever. And so our pitch to these school districts was, hey, let us put a link there that basically says business deals for local students and parents. And we will go sell to local businesses. They'll pay $15 a month. We get to keep $5, and we will give you $10. So we'll go do all the work. You just put the link there, and it's a way for you to monetize this traffic, but do it in a thoughtful way. You don't have to put a Coca-Cola ad down the hallway or whatever. I started a business with three friends
digital
from high
bake
school.
sale for the school system.
I mean, it was great, right? The problem was when you are 21, 22 years old and you come out of the environment that I'd come out of, everything is about just brute force it. And so I remember the first school district that said, okay, well, we need to get customers. And we drove to the local strip mall and we walked in the first business that is the owner here. This is what we're doing. Here's who I am, whatever. Go walk to the next business, right? And you just keep doing this. The next thing you know, you pop your head up 6 months later and you're like, I don't know if we're going to scale nationally by just walking into strip malls. And so you quickly learn, kind of, hey, look, you can get some early momentum, but you've got to figure out how do you scale? How do you train other people to do this stuff, not you yourself doing it? And so I just kind of school of hard knocks, if you will, of just trying and realizing this doesn't work or this is difficult or whatever. And over time, you just get smarter.
Yeah. And what was the net result of that business?
So we basically sold that business to one of these fast followers to Groupon. I always say that it was just interesting enough where you're like, okay, maybe there's a light at the end of the tunnel. If I get good at this, I can make some money, but definitely, I'm not retiring or anything. Maybe I made a little bit more money than some of my friends who got jobs, but I'm not even sure that's actually true, right?
Yeah, you didn't make Blackwater money, right? We get it.
I definitely would have made more money as a private contractor.
Right. But it was an investment in you.
It was, and also,
and there's no experience, there's no substitute for reps, right? Like in everything we do in life, like exercise,
in a weird way,
shooting, it's reps.
Since I was maybe 11, 12 years old, I would always have what I'll kind of put in air quotes as like a business, right? So whether it was shoveling snow or doing various things, and it was almost like by saying, I'm going to dedicate myself to this is my full-time job. It was harder than having it almost as like a side thing in high school or whatever. And so I built 2 companies. I was able to sell both of them. The second one was a little bit bigger, but again, still, hey, the light got a little bit brighter at the end of the tunnel. But I don't know how to scale these. I don't know how to build these into really big businesses. And so I made a decision to go and work at Facebook because it got to the point where I said, I either need to go to business school or I need to go learn from people who know how to scale stuff. And frankly, going to Facebook was a huge inflection point in my career because I got to learn from people who knew what they were doing.
Yeah, I think that's another sort of classic mistake. People think entrepreneurship is just this linear path, like starting in your garage where you solder something together and then before you know it, you're selling iPhones, right? Like, and very rarely is that the case. You can benefit from understanding the structure of scale of a business like Facebook.
Well, at Facebook, I would say I took away 3 major things, right? The first was I met incredible people and I really saw what excellence was, not only in the quality of the people, but in the way that the team operated. The second thing was you got to understand what I call the operational tempo of a company. And so it's like when you put really talented people and then you put them into a system that is this really well-oiled machine and everything from the way that they did reporting, the way that they did stand-ups, the way that they actually use the internal tools, all that stuff is learning. And then the third thing, and probably the most important thing, was I got put in a position where not a lot of people had worked on it before. I was 25, 26 years old at the time and had very quick success internally inside the company. So I was able to rapidly move up. And I actually think they just instilled in me like, hey, you can do this, right? And that if these people are so good and they believe that I can do this, you kind of start to convince yourself, hey, I can figure this out.
Yeah, and if you look at the landscape of companies out there, especially in the technology space, this has been slightly disrupted by the AI revolution, which we'll talk about in a second. But the classic, you and I are both angels, and we've both done a lot of investing in early stage companies. The sort of classic metric is how many of those companies were founded by ex-Googlers, ex-Facebookers, like name the big Mag 7 company. Yes. A lot of people paid their dues there, learned the game, and then they come out and they start companies.
I forget who, I think it was Adam Nash, maybe when he was the Wealthfront CEO. He wrote this blog post and it was advice to graduating seniors from college or kind of people early in their career. And his advice was don't go start your own company and also don't go work at, name your large behemoth business. He basically was like, go find like a Series C, fast growing, hot company and go work there. One, they're hiring a lot of people. Two is if you're good, you can very rapidly move up in the organization. And three is if you pick the right one, it will end up being one of those big behemoths and you'll get credit for being early. Yeah. And so I always joke because, I literally will get introduced to somebody or, maybe at a conference or something and they'll be like, he was early at Facebook. And I'm like, that is blasphemy to everyone I worked with. Right? I joined after the company went public, right? A year after the company goes public or whatever, I'm joining. And it was kind of like the first wave of employees that got it to go public. They were all leaving. Here comes the second wave. And so, I think I was employee 3,700 at the business. I left 2 years later, they had 12,000. So even to those people, they were like, oh, that guy was early. And so it's all kind of relative. Zuck would throw up in his mouth probably hearing that, the employees who were joining after the company's public were early. Right. He's like, you were not here when we were building this thing. Yeah. And so I do think that it's pretty good advice though for many young people is look, go attach yourself to a company that is growing very quickly that you can, then not only learn internally, but also, get on your resume and start to go from there.
Yeah. So post Facebook, now you've accumulated this kind of cadre of experience. Like you've sold 2 companies, you built small companies, you've sold them. Now you've been at Facebook and you've been inside the machine. What made you decide to go out on your own and what'd you do next?
Yeah. So from an investing standpoint, I was interested in investing. And I think that my experience at Facebook was very heavy in product and growth stuff. And that tends to be kind of a core component of most startups, right? Is you got to get the product right, and then you got to be able to grow that product. And so that experience, I think, was very sought after as well from many people who were doing startups. I didn't have an idea for another company. And so I just started saying to people, hey, let me put a little bit of money in your business and I'll help you with this. And so a friend of mine and I, we really didn't know if we were going to like investing, frankly. And so we raised a $3 million venture capital fund. I'm pretty sure that we didn't raise more than $150,000 or $200,000 from any investor. It was very much like
all small checks. Yeah.
Doctors, lawyers, friends, whatever we could do. And we started to invest. And, as these things go, because we didn't have a lot of capital, because of the stage we were investing in, because of the value we brought to the company, we had to be very, very diligent. We could not afford to just, let's see what happens. Yeah. And so that portfolio did very well. We were able to be, either first or very early investors in a number of companies that went on to be worth over $1 billion. And it helped us build a reputation that eventually led us to raise much more capital and really start to kind of professionalize what we were doing.
But that's interesting because there's a tension there when you're that small. And I know when you're a sergeant north of Baghdad, $3 million doesn't seem small, but in the venture world.
Yeah, I was living my dream at the time.
Yeah. No, but small relative to the kind of deal flow that you can attract and to how you can get in. But then there's this sort of risk quadrant where when you're really early stage, you expect the vast majority of those investments to go to zero. Mm-hmm. So how do you sort of balance the tension between, not being big enough to get into something that has a more proven track record, but also going so early and picking winners?
Yeah, it's funny because when I was leaving Facebook, there's a little bit of ego that goes into this too, right? Like the people who are sitting next to you are leaving and they're raising $5 million seed rounds. And so then you're like, well, I have a $3 million seed fund to start, right? And they're kind of like, are you okay? Yeah. Right? So I do think that you have to just understand what is the long-term goal and then what are the steps there and kind of block out some of the feedback or the noise. But from an investing perspective, there's really 2 ways to invest, especially in private markets. You can worry about what is the asymmetry that I generate here? What is the multiple on the capital? Or you can look at what is the total return. And over time, I've actually changed my mind on this. It used to be a great point of pride to me to find the company before anybody else and put in $100,000
and get that 1,000x.
Yeah, 25x would be amazing. That's a big number, right? And over time, you just start doing the math and you're like, by the way, it's great living you can generate that way. But it's much better if you can go and raise institutional capital or large dollars, and then maybe we should just put every dollar we could find into SpaceX, right? And who cares that it was at a $20 billion valuation, because now they're going public at $2 trillion. And so you didn't have to be contrarian. You didn't have to be a genius. You just had to be able to work hard to get access and put the money to work. And so I do think that a lot of folks kind of go through this, kind of maturation of their investing, and they realize that sometimes you start out in an area where it's about being right. And then over time, you really realize that, wait a second here, my job is actually to generate a return for our investors. And it actually doesn't matter. Do you do that because you were first, or do you just do that because you were able to get access to something? Just generate a return and you'll have a business.
And so ultimately that became the bedrock foundation of what you're doing, is creating funds.
That was the impetus actually for all of the media stuff that we do today, which is, I had somewhat of a reputation inside of Silicon Valley in kind of a very kind of insider group of people who were looking for product and growth stuff, which was great. But most people who were starting companies that I wanted to invest in, they weren't coming out of that environment. And so, well, who are you would kind of be one of the first questions, right? Why should I let you invest in my company? What are you going to do for me, et cetera? And so I realized, because of some of the work I'd done inside of Facebook, that having an audience would be very valuable. And so I started to create a lot of the content to then build a reputation, to, kind of show the knowledge and experience that I had. And it took a life of its own, but really it was specifically to be able to win access to deals at a very early stage where, most of these people didn't know who I was.
And you were able to grow that podcast into a really significant megaphone. It's given you the ability not just to have access to deal flow, but also to be a thought leader in the space. One of those things that you have been an early proponent of is Bitcoin. Tell me about your relationship to digital currency, because people know you for this.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. Every time I have like Fox News in my office, or Fox Business, or Bloomberg or something, there's Pomp.
They're asking me what's going to happen. I don't know.
Yeah.
Higher. Right?
Yeah.
That's the only answer. No, so in creating a lot of the content and everything, you talk to a lot of people. And so one of the benefits of that is you can ask them, like, what are your best ideas? And I had heard of Bitcoin 2 times before. In 2012, somebody was messaging me about it, and I was very dismissive. In 2014, we hired a guy, David Marcus, who is the former president of PayPal. He joins Facebook, and he will not stop talking about Bitcoin. And he sat maybe 100 feet away from me or so. And
that's like a meme, like the guy in the office who will stop talking about Bitcoin.
Here was the crazy part. With all kind of fairness to David, I think he was maybe 40. Like, he was not old by any means. But at Facebook, when you're 26, you're like, who's the old guy? What's he talking about? And so I turned to one of the engineers and I was like, is this real? And the guy was just, it's stupid, ignore it. And so I was already 0 for 2 on the whole Bitcoin thing. But eventually a college freshman came to me, and he was very smart because he did not talk about Bitcoin or crypto or kind of that entire pitch. He just said to me, if you buy this computing hardware and you plug it in, it will print these coins. Well, how much do the machines cost? How much does it print? It's just math. And so I sold some Facebook stock, which, I was very nervous to do at the time, but I bought some of these machines and I just started mining. And I wasn't mining Bitcoin, I was mining Ethereum, but I was mining it between $5 and $8 a coin. And this is in the end of 2016 and the beginning of 2017. So I think I'm late to this because, by the way, it had been like a penny and now it's at, $8. We start to mine. We're mining a couple of Ethereum per day. And I'm doing the math and I'm like, man, I spent a lot. I think I spent like $50,000 on these mining machines, and we're getting, $40 a day or something. I don't know how long this is going to take. How are we going to get our money back, right? Maybe I've made a mistake here. But in the beginning of 2017, Ethereum goes from, $8 to it's basically $150 in a couple of months. And now I realize that we're going to make our money back very quickly. And I have just made an amazing investment. And I sell all of the Ethereum, because anything that goes from $8 to $150 can't possibly be sustainable. And then through the rest of 2017, I watched Ethereum go from $150 to $1,400 and sit there in, wallow in the pain of what could have been. But what it did cause me to do is I said, I need to figure this out. Obviously, I don't know what I'm doing. I went from, I'm not going to make my money back, to I'm a genius, to I'm an idiot, all in the span of about 6 months. I either need to do some work here, or I'm going to have to just go play a different game. And that was really what pushed me down the rabbit hole of crypto.
I think, like, general philosophy, everybody should have the one that got away, and they should 100%. Have multiple. The one Warren Buffett missed the technology, wave, and then became like the biggest investor in Apple. Mine, I have many. My Bitcoin related one is I had a very close friend from the media world who was actually in that movie, The Mighty Ducks. And he kept telling me in like 2011, 2012 to buy Bitcoin. And I was like, this is...
He was telling everybody, I know who this is.
You know who it is.
Yeah.
And he was telling everybody, right? He put 100K into Bitcoin then, right? Which turned into $4 billion when Bitcoin was at 20, right? And I was like, I am not, putting my hard-earned money into something people use to buy drugs on the internet. Like, I'm just not doing it. So I'm there with you.
Well, what's funny is I look back and many of the most formative investments I've ever made, most people will look at, what are the returns that you generate, right? And look, we have made some investments as a team where we are, one of the top 4 holders of a company that went public. The company's now worth $10 billion. People are, they want to talk about that. I look back and I'm like, well, we actually made some mistakes. Maybe we should put more money earlier, or we sold at certain points, whatever. But those aren't actually the formative things, because it's kind of like, was it us, or was it just like the company, or was it the entrepreneur? You don't really able to assign the success to you. The mistakes you definitely can. And so probably the most formative investment experience that I have is when I came back from Iraq. I forget how much they paid us, but maybe it was 60, 70, 80K. So that's whatever you get paid as, infantry soldier, and it's not taxed, right? Because you're below the tax limit. So you're all excited. And you're sitting there and you're like, okay, now I have like a little nest egg. How do I grow this thing? And so of course I do what most people did, is I started Forex trading in class. And I had both the good fortune and the bad luck of taking maybe $8,000, $9,000 and turning into like 70 grand, short period of time. And one of the formative parts of this experience is playing football. You have people from all walks of life that are on the team, and you tend to hang out together. And so sitting in an economics class one day, I was not really even trading, just kind of watching, and there's things moving around on the screen, looks cool. And there was a kid who came from a fairly tough background. And he said to me at the end of the class, he goes, "What were you doing?" And I said, explained it to him. And I said, yeah, I made $2,000. And he looked at me, he goes, "That's better than dealing drugs."
Yeah.
Right? And he said, and it's legal, right?
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, I never thought of it that way, but okay. The bad side of that story is that summer I went and I did an internship, and, I'm very interested. I'm making a lot of money here doing this. And so I started to trade on my phone, and 72 became, 20 very quickly. And I quickly realized I do not understand this game. And, so I think that you quickly learn as you become an investor, I'm not good at trading. I don't like trading, actually, right? It's very stressful. It's a skill set that I don't have. Let me go play a game where I think I have an advantage. And so those formative moments, I think you can draw back only with the hindsight of, this really shaped my strategy and who I am today as an investor.
My overall philosophy is that it takes a long ass time to be a good investor.
100%.
It is the product of a cumulative experience. And that experience starts in the military for those of us who are entrepreneurs, and it continues through whatever secondary education, that could be OJT, or it could be formal education. And then it continues through a series of swings and misses and mistakes and micro successes that compound on each other. I think most of entrepreneurial success is really like compound interest. Starts small and it continues to grow over time.
The other piece that I in hindsight appreciate, but I don't think I did at the time, is, the military really teaches you, like, do the hard thing. Right. Go the difficult way. It is harder in the short term, but it will pay off in the long run. And I have some friends who are incredibly smart. And I always tell them, I say, I am jealous of you. I'm not jealous of many people in the world, but I'm jealous of you, because it seems like you wake up and you kind of just, everything works, right? You're smart, you're good looking, you're successful. And I wish that was my life, but instead I always got to take the hard path, right? Whether because of because of my decisions, or, the environment, or whatever. Somehow I'm always on the hard path. And I'm thankful for it, though, because I think that it does, in moments where, if it had been easy, if I hadn't passed on Bitcoin twice before, if I hadn't done the Ethereum thing and sold it, et cetera, when Bitcoin then was going through these massive sell-offs, I would have been selling. But at that time, because I'd gone kind of this harder way, I had very deep conviction, because I felt like I had the confidence of having done the work. And so I always am fond of the parable of the Chinese farmer, where the story basically goes that there's some he has some horses, they run away. And his neighbor comes over and says, "Man, you're really unlucky. Those horses ran away." And he just says, "Maybe." And then the horses come back, and the neighbor comes over and says, "Wow, you're lucky they came back." He says, "Maybe." And then his kid is riding on the horse and falls off, breaks his leg. And then the neighbor comes over and goes, "You're really unlucky." He says, "Maybe." And then all of a sudden a war breaks out, and they come in to draft his son, but his leg is broken. And they say, "Wow, you're so lucky." He says, "Maybe." Right. And so you just kind of always have to just say maybe, and just wait and it'll all work out.
Yeah, extraordinary. I want to one of the things that we like to do here is we go very high level, right? And I think we've done that. But we also like to give really pragmatic and tactical advice for people who might be at an earlier stage of their service members' journey. So we do a little section that we call rapid fire.
All right,
I say it's like shooting steel, instant feedback. All right. So best investment you ever made?
Best investment I ever made, Bitcoin.
Dumbest financial mistake you ever learned from?
Selling ETH at $150.
Yeah, I thought you might say that after that story. Military skill that you think has been most helpful in the business world?
The ability to communicate in stressful situations and do so where you understand that just because you said it doesn't mean they heard it.
Is there a military habit that you still keep today?
I probably wake up too early. I like to cut my hair a certain way. And my wife would joke that I probably have too many dirty jokes that I like to say to make all my buddies laugh.
Yeah. Me too. I keep my hair exactly like I did in the military. You saw Pete's speech to everybody. Like, yeah, hey, if you want a beard, join Special Forces. I couldn't grow a beard, but I could grow long hair. Yeah. Is there a book that changed your mindset about business?
There's 3 books I read. I actually read them sitting in Iraq while I was bored. And I read all 3 of them back to back. And I think they were very formative. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, The Richest Man in Babylon, and Think and Grow Rich. And they taught me absolutely zero about anything I do today in terms of tactical, actionable things. But they completely changed my mind about how to think about money and wealth and long-term planning.
Hard stop, pause. This is a mission critical point that's never been addressed on the show before, but I think you just stumbled on something. Well, one side note, Richest Man in Babylon is pretty funny to be reading on deployment in Iraq. Yeah,
hilarious.
There's to be honest, jokes embedded there that I don't know.
I don't know if I bought the books or if somebody sent them to me, but somehow those 3 books got to me, and I remember reading them, being like, "Oh my God, there is a different world out there."
But the point that I want to highlight and underscore, because we really have never talked about it in a tactical, practical way, is you and I have both been on deployments and we see what people do with their time. There are people with, like, in our days, it was, the DVDs.
The DVDs, dollar DVDs you can get from the little market. Yeah.
Right. There was, in my case, Afghan, your case, Iraqi kids selling bootlegged, pirated DVDs of every American movie that you were missing back home. And guys would just sit in the rack and watch that shit over and over again. Or, like, I don't know what the current equivalent is, video game, whatever. You can squander your time on deployment, or you can read 3 books that will change your mindset and your life forever. And how you spend that time. And I saw it in over and over again. I saw guys build businesses on deployment. I saw guys, to finish some of their college credits while they're on deployment. How you utilize that time. My thesis is how you utilize that time. My hypothesis is how you utilize that time will fundamentally affect what happens when you come home and when you transition ultimately out of the military.
Yeah, it's this weird thing. I'm very fond of saying now, like, it's better to be busy than bored. But you mentioned it earlier, like, deployments are very boring for a lot of the time. And mind you, I watch plenty of movies, but you kind of like run out of movies to watch at some point. And so it's almost like once you've wasted all the time, then you've still got time left. And so you got to figure out something to do. But I do think it's also that there is curiosity. And we see it now with whether it's the AI technology or just in general. We live in a world where you have access to any piece of information that you would like. You have access to start any business, build any product. And so the limiting factor is actually, are you curious about it? And are you a self-starter? Will you go and do this? And I don't frankly know. Is it like an environmental thing that can be taught, or is it an innate thing? But I do think that there was different groups of people, right? And I tend to gravitate towards, if I have a lot of free time, I will find myself learning, reading, even watching podcasts or whatever. And so the more you can do that, I think you're just programming your own internal algorithm. And, look, I like Instagram just like everybody else or whatever. And I probably spend too much time on social media, but you are programming your mind. And so the more you can do it with, kind of nutritious intellectual food, the better it is for you. And so you just got to, kind of always remember, am I actually doing this because it's got long-term value, or am I just sitting here, essentially just doom scrolling and frying my brain?
I talk about this all the time using the nutrition analog. We will spend an hour 2 hours. Many of our friends and colleagues will spend an hour or 2 hours in the gym getting their bodies strong. But what are you feeding your brain and how are you exercising your brain is almost this forbidden subject that we rarely talk about. And your nutrition diet for your brain health is really, really fundamental. At the end of the day, if you want to get ahead in business, let's say you and I are working at our early stage at Facebook, working side by side with each other, who's going to get ahead faster? Like me because I can sprint 100 meters faster, or you because you're reading and you're improving and sharpening the knife on your mental hardware? I would argue it's the latter.
Yeah, it's also over time you learn like if you want to get something done, give it to a busy person, right? And it's not because they're busy that they're successful. It's just like they've become very good at managing their time. They are very kind of efficient at what they're doing, but also because they are busy means they've been doing a lot of things. So they know a lot of people, they've got a lot of experience, they've got access to a lot of resources, et cetera. And so there's just something about when you look at your day, right? And I actually have started to, at the end of each week, I get a report and we color code my calendar. How much time am I spending doing certain things? And I'm probably a little OCD about my calendar and I put every single detail in there and try to track every call, et cetera. But what you start to realize is over time, more and more of it is productive. And I love, there's this woman, Catherine Boyle, who is at Andreessen Horowitz. And she has something called the...
Wasn't she running American Dynamism
She
for
is.
a while?
Yeah. And she has something called the production principle. And the entire idea is with her kids, it started. So they're on a screen. And she would say, are they consuming things and being non-productive? Or are they using it to create things and learn and be productive? If they're being productive, they can use the screen. If they are not, I take it away from them. And then she realized, well, what's the difference between a kid and herself? And so when she's on her phone, she asks herself, am I being productive or am I not? If I'm not, I put my phone down. If I'm being productive, I keep using it. And I think that's just like such a simple, great thing that anyone, regardless of industry or professional career or anything, can use of just like when you are using technology, are you being productive or are you not? If you're not, put it down and go do something else. And if you just keep doing that over and over again over time, you will become a more productive person.
Yeah. You implied this idea that we have the whole corpus of human knowledge in our hands that we're holding. So all of the opportunity is there for us. Not always all the access, but certainly all of the knowledge and the opportunity is there right in the palm of your hand. And we are at this transformational moment where all of that knowledge just got accelerated and all of those potential inputs just got accelerated. So what are you front sight focused on now? What are you thinking about most?
Yeah. I think that there are two different approaches to artificial intelligence. And this is what I spend almost all of my time on because these two different approaches are going to inform what happens in the world, how do people invest, what do you build, et cetera. And so you can think of one group as the general purpose approach. And so this is the OpenAIs, the Anthropics, et cetera. They basically are taking as much knowledge and data and information as they can. They are training these models, and then they are basically saying you can ask it anything and it will be good at doing that. And I think all of us who have used these products are very impressed, right? I am blown away on a daily basis by what these general purpose models can do. But then there is a second kind of approach, which is more specialized workflows. And that is saying, okay, well, what if we take the synthetic superhuman intelligence that AI provides and we build very customized approaches to specific jobs? So the thing that we've chosen to do is in the personal finance space. And the way that I always describe this to someone is if you talk to ChatGPT and you ask it, how do I get my taxes down? It will give you very generalized advice, a general model. And it's valuable. It'll tell you about, tax loss harvesting or bonus depreciation in real estate or whatever, but it doesn't know anything about you. And it doesn't have the personalization capability. Whereas with us, we built a product called Sylvia, which basically every time you talk to any sort of AI model, you are actually feeding it the context of your personal portfolio. So now when you ask, how do I get my tax rate down? It goes every single asset and it says, well, you own this piece of real estate, you could bonus depreciate it. You own this stock, you tax loss harvest. And so the reason why I describe that is because these two different approaches are going to inform, well, which private companies are valuable? What infrastructure ends up being valuable? How is this going to impact the job market, right? How many data centers do we really need? Is it just a small number of very large models, or are we going to have all these specialized workflows? And so that to me is, unfortunately, the answer is probably going to be we're going to have both. It's not going to be either or. And so if that is true, which, I have growing confidence it is, I actually think the bigger risk in society is that we are all underestimating how big and impactful and important this AI thing is. And if that is true, then we are underinvesting in all the infrastructure. We are not using these technologies enough. And frankly, there is probably some age cutoff on a generalized basis where young people are much more open to adopting this technology than older people. And regardless of where that age cutoff is, now you have an entire portion of the workforce where you're going to have to do work to get them to be reskilled to use this stuff. And so there's an opportunity, but also if you're in that age group, you're going to get a leg up if you go and you start to use technology.
And why personal finance? Why did you identify that as a node that?
Because I'm incredibly selfish when it comes to building products, and I wanted the product. And personal finance is always this very interesting dynamic because most products, when you build them for the largest addressable market. Right. And so, what do most people want is they want to know how much money am I spending, what budget, how do I make sure that I don't run out of money? And so everything is very focused on kind of the expense side. What I was facing was that's great, but I don't worry as much about, do I buy a $5 coffee today or do I not? Right. I'm very fortunate to be in the position I am in life. But what I'm really interested in is, could I make more than $5? And then I can buy the coffee, right? Like that'd be great. And so it's much more of an abundance type mindset. And so I was trying to use the models to help me understand my finances and my investment portfolio, et cetera. And it was very frustrating because the way that I was doing it was unsustainable. And so we went and we started to build the product. And then from there, it kind of took off.
Yeah, I do think that the sort of connective tissue between your budgeting and your spending and your investing has been the missing link in personal finance. I guess the holy grail is that you could have all of your personal finance on a single pane of glass. Mm-hmm. Lots have tried, but now it actually might be within the realm of possibility, right? Because if you have an agent that can actually dip into all of these different silos and domains, and then they can kind of make a legible paragraph out of that soup.
I always laugh. There's a meme online. People just say, Claude, make me rich. Make no mistakes. Right? Like that is the dream of everybody,
I gotta
right?
try that. Why would I try that?
That is if you really get to the essence, and I constantly remind our team at Sylvia is, look, what do people want? People ultimately want to have financial security. Yes, people would love to be incredibly wealthy, et cetera, but the average American simply wants to have a better life than they have today. And it doesn't have to be, I have 50 grand and a good job and I want to have $1 billion. Actually, what they want is, I don't want to have to check my bank account when I go to the grocery store or go to the restaurant. I don't have to worry about that gas is $3.50 or $4.50, right? Like that little change can be incredibly impactful. But how do you do that? And actually, the thing I always come back to, which I think is over discussed in terms of everyone knows it's a problem, but under discussed in the impact, is financial education. And if you look in this country, 50% of Americans, they have no investments or very little investments, and they get crushed by inflation. The other 50% are making out like bandits when inflation happens. Well, inflation is inflation, and everyone has the same ability to buy stocks or do whatever. It's an education gap. And so when you start to look at that, a lot of the work that you've been doing, right, I think a lot of companies that our friends all have built is trying to ultimately get at that. How do you educate people to know you have to be an investor? But also with the rise of AI, I think a lot of people are saying, is there an easy button? Historically, it's always been like, easy button, run away, right? But now maybe someone's going to crack it, right? Maybe it will become easy.
Certainly, like the abundant pool of knowledge is easier. And I think it'll be a tool and accelerant. It's so funny that you use the grocery store example. The first member of the military community that I got to invest in my platform, the one that I ultimately sold to a publicly traded company, was a military spouse of an Air Force fighter pilot who had never invested, who had never bought in public equity before, never invested in the stock market. And I had started with asking what her mission was, right? And the way I always ask it is the same. And you just paralleled the language, like, what's your rich life? Nobody ever says like the G700, which just rolled off the line, right? Nobody ever says that, right? Not if they're being thoughtful, right?
If I owned one, where would I go?
Yeah. Yeah. She said, I want to be able to go to Whole Foods and not look at the prices on the on the vegetables, right? That's exactly what you're saying. That really is the goal, is to feel that sense of financial security and freedom.
I always tell stories, when you're growing up, everyone has kind of a different relationship with money, et cetera. And I will remember the very first time I came back from the military, and I was in my hometown. I have 4 younger brothers, and 2 of them went with me, and we went to Moe's Southwest Grill. And I remember it's like yesterday, I order my food, they order theirs, and we get to the end of the line, and I pull out my debit card, because I didn't even own a credit card at the time, and I pay. And I look, and these are my 2 youngest brothers, and they're looking at me like I got 6 heads and I came down from some starship or something. I say, what? And they said, you didn't have to check the balance, right? And you forget in a very short period of time, like, no, I used to pull out the app and look to make sure, do I have, $22 in here before I swipe this thing, because I don't want to be embarrassed if whatever. And it's not like we didn't grow up in some horrible environment or whatever, but you're a kid, right? You just don't have a job, right? You don't have anything. And so you got to go figure it out. But I do think that kind of mental pressure, that mental exhaust of constantly worrying about this stuff, people underestimate just how negative that is on someone's life.
Extraordinary. I still maintain that you are the high water mark. You are
coming from this guy.
Yeah. No, in what it means to go from military to money, to transition successfully, to give back, to create companies of value, and to create ideas of value in the world, from your media platforms to your business. It's been an honor to be your friend and to watch you do it. How can people follow the work you're doing? Is Sylvia available? I think people are probably scrambling to download right now.
Yeah, people can go to CFO Sylvia, it's SILVIA.com. And the thing I always tell folks is, we've got pretty hard data now. People who regularly or heavily use the product, they grow their net worth faster than people who don't. And so, we're trying to make the product as good as we can, but it's a daily grind.
Amazing. And personally, LinkedIn,
Twitter is probably, or X is best, just at A Pompliano.
Yeah. Listen, I don't feel like I need to promote you. You're a giant media star. You created this huge media ecosystem.
The secret to media, right? Huh. Just say what everyone else is thinking and no one else wants to say, so that everyone hears you say it, but then you also got to take the heat a little bit, right?
You're just that rabbit out there on the roads north of Baghdad.
The hard life,
right? Exactly. Taking the hard path. Well, taking the hard path is a great metaphor. Pomp, thank you so much for being here. Extraordinary. And I look forward to more in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks for doing it.
Yeah. For our guest, that's it. We'll be back next week with another episode of Tactical Wealth. Until then, just a reminder, I hope you're taking notes. More importantly, I hope you're taking action. Stay tactical. All right. Thanks for locking in with us today. Shout out to Siebert.Bauer and Siebert Financial for supporting our journey. We'll be back next week with another powerhouse conversation. More founders, more builders, and leaders who are playing offense in life and in business. Make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel for exclusive content and extended cuts of your favorite episodes. Until next week, stay tactical, stay driven.